Okay, I think we're live, Teresa.
All right. So excited to
Ah,
be here.
welcome,
Yeah.
welcome. Welcome to our final live stream of 2021. I'm Cynthia Forstman. This is Teresa Agresta. We are sisters and we are co-founders of CultureTalk. And if you're new to the conversation, I just want to share a quick thing about what CultureTalk is. We are in the business of making culture a tangible business asset. CultureTalk Profiles, which is a measurement system we use, are something that consultants and coaches and trainers use as a red thread to tie together our personal stories, our collective stories, with the goal of closing the gap between who we are as individuals, our potential, who we are as teams, kind of team performance, and the overall organizational strategy. So that's what we do at CultureTalk. We have been working our way through a series of 6 live streams to help people understand how could you activate this simple storytelling system across an organization and across a talent life cycle. So we often say it's hard to believe that one system as simple as storytelling could do so many different things. And that's why we're taking a tour, if you will, to understand the kind of impact that our consultants and coaches are creating with CultureTalk. So we're up to week 4 in this final week of 2021. Connection between culture and managing a strategy in an organization.
Awesome. So thinking about that connection, one thing that's really important to understand is that culture is foundational to that connection between management and executive decisions and strategies, the things we really want to move forward to create business results. And the CEO and the leadership team have an outsized impact in the culture itself. So while everybody is contributing to that, we know that the leadership team and the people that are creating the overarching strategies have a larger say and a bigger impact on what happens within that culture. But it is foundational. And it's one of the reasons that it has the power to have impact on so many potential strategies. We're going to share some case studies to bring this point to life because it's the best way that we know to demonstrate how culture, and especially the CultureTalk profiles using archetypes, can have that kind of a broad stroke that has positive outcomes in so many different ways. So by way of example, we're going to share with you something about mergers and acquisitions happening both here in the US and in Australia. We're going to take a look at cultural transformation under the guidance of a new leader, a new CEO being brought on in Brazil. And we're going to take a look at bringing together multiple tech companies in the US and how the culture became the foundation to create a strategy against the brand and the teams and the leadership, all within the one growing organization. So Cynthia, maybe kick us off with this Australian case study and what one of our partners is doing there.
Yes. So I want to say too that the culture is like the most important enabler of a strategy, right? We can have, especially going into a new year, we all have new strategies, like business strategies, growth strategies. But if we don't have a culture that can support those strategies, they're going to fall flat. So the case I want to share is brought to us by one of our CultureTalk partners, Sarah Birkin. She's working with a large construction management firm in Australia that had a strategy of growth regarding a merger. So one company actually acquired a second company to do kind of a vertical integration and create, ideally in a merger, a win-win. right? So there were 8 business units that were being vertically integrated in this merger. And there was even a lot of like brand. There was some work done around trying to bring these teams together. But then, as the business moved forward, there seemed to be like this tension and this breakdown between certain teams that were part of the merger. And so Sarah came in with an intervention, and what she did was actually measure the culture that existed, not even just within the companies that were merged, but on the different teams that were now tasked with really working together
Working
and coming
together.
together, right? I mean, it's like,
That happens a lot, right?
yeah.
You've worked with
And
them.
yeah, and what she discovered as she did that analysis through Culture Talk and the Culture Talk profiles is that the teams actually did share certain story patterns, and there were certain ways where the teams could potentially become aligned. But there were also some key differences in how certain teams operated. And certain teams were more sage-like and wanted to be thorough and specific about knowledge and the passing of knowledge. And certain teams were a little bit more jester and magician-like. So they believed more in kind of, oh, it'll all, let's go with the flow, let's have a little fun, let's get a little creative. And those two energies really created conflict that was you know making the merger potential challenging, right?
Right. And when those things are unspoken, it's really hard, right?
Yeah,
Because you're just having this assumption that the other team doesn't know what they're doing, isn't prepared for the change, or maybe
isn't taking things seriously.
taking things, yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Right.
Or
And
taking things too seriously, too hung
right.
up on the detail.
Right. And so I think in bringing in the intervention, what happened with archetypes is they were able to create a common language that the teams could look through the lens of archetypes and go, oh, I understand why you are doing this and why I'm doing this, and where the misalignment between those two team cultures were. So as they had that language to start sorting those things out, they can, you know, maximize the strategy of the merger. So just an example taking place over the past year and a half in Australia.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's travel to the US, where another company, this time a technology company and data storage and management company, was undergoing significant growth. They started first with brand foundations, and JP Lecoeur and his partner Paul Mayat looking at their brand and looking at bringing together this organization through the lens of, how do we talk about our growing organization? And in doing so, created a foundation for culture and a common language, like you just mentioned, that enabled them to then, right from that one assessment, that first starting point, also consider what are the differences between some of our primary US locations? Why are they struggling with conflict? And how can we get them to be able to work through these sticky points, that have been consistently a problem? So they had an outcome of brand, they had an outcome of conflict resolution, and then they moved forward and they acquired a much larger organization. And this time they did the culture work right up front. So another M&A situation where they were bringing on, twice as many employees as they had. They were growing by a very large amount, and wanted to make sure that they got it right from the get-go. So tying together the cultures of two emerging organizations, and finding the synergies similarly. And then they continued from a strategic perspective to say, hey, we have made it a point to make sure that our whole team understands this common culture language. Let's use it to bring leadership and executive teams together. And so they built on their common understanding by helping people to see, how do I show up as a leader within the culture? They used that foundation to build leadership behaviors and then to communicate those consistently. They took it from there to build a reward and recognition system that flowed from those expected behaviors. So if we have these clear articulated behaviors and now we are rewarding people against them, training our executive and leadership teams to understand how they show up in relationship to those behaviors. And so really from that common foundation and that common language, all of these strategic outcomes are flowing.
Right. And I think one of the things I'm thinking about is we hear time and time again in a merger, the people part, the human
Right.
aspect of coming together, whether it's a large business endeavor or even, where you're buying smaller companies, like bringing people on board and getting them integrated into the culture. I think Culture Talk, it's a standout use case for how to, again, make it a tangible thing that we can start to talk about what's in the way of
Right.
our success and how do we do this better. I wanted to share about a project that's going on in Brazil this year, where there's a very large organization that has been very successful to date. And, a culture got built that was influenced primarily by the leader.
Right. The
Teresa.
original, very strong, right? Very strong success story built on a very strong leader who had a particular way of doing things.
Right. And as you said, earlier, that leadership profile often has sort of an outsized impact on the
Right.
culture that gets developed. And so this particular organization now has new leadership that has come in.
Right. And very intentional, right? That new leaders coming in with specific goals, as they often do.
Mm,
And
yeah.
that's a good thing, right? That's a real plus.
And a shift in strategy. So,
And I read a necessary shift based on the things that all companies are going through globally today,
yeah.
addressing, the digitization of the business, reacting to the pandemic, and also really driving from a place of, wanting to create positive outcomes around the diversity and inclusion conversation that's unfolding.
Right. So new leader, new, changing, evolving, high impact business strategy that's evolving. How do you get all those things lined up? So in this case, we have a consultant team bringing in Culture Talk as a solution set to measure what is the culture that has existed in this organization, and what is the culture that will be needed in the future to achieve the strategy, and what are the gaps between where we are today and where we're going. And we know through conversations that this has been very enlightening to the leadership team to understand some of those key components.
Right. And instead of trying to force the solutions and, not really understand why the people within the culture who've been living the legacy culture aren't able to react, they're trying to proactively understand what are the ways in which we can move this in the direction it needs to go in a way that feels, invites people into the conversation, helps them to make the transitions, and honors and respects the history that they've had, as teams and as a culture in the past. So a much more effective way to move a strategy, sort of like we like to say here, from the head of the leader to the heart of the team. How do you get people to come with you instead of, watching them fall by the wayside, which is what we see a lot of these days with the great resignation and even CEOs that are leaving their posts in order to enact, what they're trying to see in a new company instead of, really working through some of these challenging issues,
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting outcomes too in the case in Brazil is the recognition that, even though we need to make changes, there are going to be changes that are possible. There's going to be a way to do it that's possible based on the culture that we have. So how do we instead of trying to, put out a new list of behaviors that doesn't make sense for this organization.
Right. It doesn't align with what people are wired to do.
Right. How do we identify this is who we are and how do we do that? Right. In our own unique, culturally supported way, how can we create these new outcomes together that fit with who we are?
Right. And
So
one of the interesting aspects of that, I think, to take that one step further, is recognizing that you might have an archetype pattern as part of your culture profile that doesn't feel like a fit to the new desired place we need to go. And yet, by using some of the strengths of that pattern and tying into, hey, it doesn't have to look, or we don't have to get there by one path. There are many ways to get to the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. Because at the end of the day, we're looking to achieve business results and business outcomes when we
right.
set out down a particular road. And so being creative about the path that you take, and it might look different based on the strengths that exist and the, just the desired approach that your culture wants to take, and that's okay. And so I think having this common language allows you to lay out a path that works for you, as opposed to force everybody down a path just because you feel like that's the direction you need to go.
I'm really glad you bring that up because, there is a school of thought that says this is what the right culture looks like. Like
Right.
every business needs to have this kind of culture in
I
order
think
to,
we have a lot of that going on in the talk today. This emphasis
yeah.
on culture, and I think it's important.
Yeah, I know, but this idea that it's not a cookie cutter and that there is the right culture for your organization and it's not the same. So when we look out, into the market and see other companies and say, "Oh, we're not going to be them ever. So how do we be us and do us in the most successful way?" And that's unique. Every cultural profile for an organization is unique. And with the Culture Talk measurement tools that we've created, you can uncover, right, what is the unique profile of our culture and how do we activate that
Right. Activate the best version of who we are. Right.
right,
And
how
our
do we activate it to
potential.
your point, accomplish the things that we set out and need to accomplish? So that's the kind of work that our partners, our certified consultants, coaches, and in-house learning and development teams are bringing into their cultural initiatives. We would love to invite you to join us if you're working in the space of talent, in the space of executive coaching, leadership coaching, team building, brand building.
Right. If you've been asked to carry the culture torch,
Yeah.
sort of like tossed, whether you're a consultant or an in-house team, and it's been like, okay, here, you take care of this culture thing.
Hot
Well, then we
potato.
can help.
Yeah.
We can help. Maybe you've been given that without any clear directive about how would you go about it. We've got 5 distinct principles that we can teach you to understand how do you navigate this culture conversation and turn it into a strategic business asset, something very tangible. So the way to do that is to join us for a certification class. And we have 2 sessions coming up in January. January 20th, we will be leading one at 10 a.m. New York and one at 5 p.m. New York to capture people, as you can hear, from around the world who are doing this work. So we would love to have you join us. Hit us up, either one of us, for a one-on-one conversation to learn more about it, or check out the links that we'll post for direct access to learn more on our website.
So with that, we're bringing out to 2021, which I know has been a challenging year in many regards.
Yeah.
And we look forward to working with you and helping you get your business strategies and cultures aligned in 2022.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.